Yo, welcome back to the channel, boys and girls. I wanted to give you guys an update on my Scott Foil RC Pro now that I've been riding it for a couple of months now. And I'm happy to report that there have been no creaks, no rattles, no seat post slips. It has been a fantastic bike to ride. By all accounts, this Foil RC Pro is essentially a dream build for me. The problem is, on one hand, where do I go from here in terms of future bike projects because the Foil RC is such an amazing bike? But on the other hand, the fun in what I do on this channel is the constant search of finding new and great bikes and wheels that could potentially come close. Now at this point with this bike, I have taken it on some of my faster group rides. I've done 100-mile rides on it. It is surprisingly comfortable, believe it or not. I've used a variety of different wheels on this bike just for further context. And essentially this bike does everything I needed to do specifically for my type of riding that I do locally here in Chicagoland. Next up, let's talk about the pros and cons of this bike because it isn't perfect just yet. Now let's first start with the cons, and I'm sure that some of these details will be updated in the next iteration of the Scott Foil, assuming Scott doesn't go out of business by then. So the first one is the limited 30mm max tire clearance. I would prefer to see either 32 or 34C tire clearance, just because if you are riding out in the fall or the early months in spring, just having that little bit of extra tire clearance would make this bike just a little bit more versatile. The next con I have with this bike, and this is pretty much exclusive to the majority of the Western brands on the market today, is the proprietary cockpit components. Because the steer tube is only 1 inch diameter, you are very limited to the front end and what you can spec it with. Basically, you have to go with components specifically from Scott, and there's only a limited amount of third-party brands that are offering up stems and cockpits to accommodate that tiny steer tube. The next con I have with this, now this isn't necessarily an issue for me personally, but I know this can be an issue for other customers on the market. So this current foil uses a BB86 instead of a T47. Now personally, I've never had any issues with creaking when it comes to BB86, and truthfully, having a BB86 press fit bottom bracket usually means that that bottom bracket area as a whole can provide a lot of stiffness when it comes to being out of the saddle and really putting down the power. But I think just in terms of long-term service and replaceability, a threaded T47 bottom bracket would be the preferred option. Another con with the Scott Foil is, as you can imagine, it's not the best in the crosswind, but it is slightly better than the Giant Propel. You figure that deep, chunky head tube section is great when you're on the flats in a tailwind, but it's not so great when you are, of course, having crosswinds. Now, what this means is if you live somewhere where either there's a lot of crosswind or you live somewhere with a lot of climbing that also has a lot of crosswind, I don't think that the Scott Foil would be the best option in that regard. Next up, let's talk about the pros. So as you can imagine, this bike is very stiff and is very responsive in terms of its riding dynamics, something that you want in a fast aero bike. The two-piece seat post design offers a surprising amount of comfort as well as road vibration dampening. This is one of the main ways that has allowed me to be able to ride this bike upwards of 5 to 6 hours or 100-mile rides. And I'm also assuming too that some of the decisions made to the specific carbon layup also add to the comforts in this regard. And just personally speaking, subjectively, this is a very good looking design with the Scott Foil RC Pro. You won't be confused with this bike compared to some of the other bikes on the market today that are still leaning on towards that more bike to rule them all sort of design. Next up, let's just quickly go through my personal bike setup. So like I said, guys, this is a Scott Foil RC Pro. It's a size large /56. We have these wheels from XM Carbon Speed. This is the CS56 Pro wheels that come with full titanium spokes, and the weight on these is like 1,250 grams. Very lightweight wheels, and they offered just a good balance between stiffness and comfort. We have Di2 Ultegra 5236 crank with a Dura Ace cassette 11 to 30 out back. Next up, we have the Magine TEO power meter and 170mm carbon cranks. This of course is a spider based power meter. And then as far as the front end, we have a Synchros Aero stem. It's a 130mm length with a -10 degree angle. Now again, when I first got this frame set, it didn't come with any sort of cockpit, so that meant of course that I had to source my own, meaning that I had to to use the proprietary stem from Scott. And then the saddle, of course, is my favorite of all time. It's the Envy/Sella Italia SLR Boost saddle. We have Galfer Wave disc rotors, Look Keel blade ceramic pedals. We're using GP 5000 in the 28C tires, along with Ride Now TPU inner tubes. And then all in for a complete bike ready to ride with both bottle cages, we're looking at like 7.2 kilograms, which is a fantastic weight for an Aero frame. Of course, I could drop the weight by finding maybe like 200 or 300 grams of lighter components, but who really cares? I'm really satisfied with the weight of this bike all in. Cycle Limited is your one-stop shop for new and pre-owned bikes, frames, wheels, and components. They are based in South Florida and are a family-owned operation that has really streamlined the buying and selling process, making it as straightforward and convenient as possible. One of the great things about Cycle Limited is they work directly with brand manufacturers to offer very competitive prices on new equipment. All of their inventory ships directly from the warehouse, so you don't have to wait for the individual sellers to package their bikes, ship to Cycle Limited, have Cycle Limited's professional mechanics inspect the bikes, and then send the bike to you, which could easily be a 2 to 3 week turnaround. Just like with my Ventum NS1, which was a lovely bike by the way, my Scott foil frame set was packaged exceptionally well and arrived here in Chicago in about 3 business days. So be sure to check out their website, and I do have a $75 off code which can be used on orders of $500 or more. Now back to the video. Moving right along, let's talk about the Scott foil versus Tavel Aero debate, because this question has come up pretty often on my Instagram. Now the Scott foil is the best bike I've ridden in terms of riding dynamics and style. The Tavel Aero, however, is probably still my favorite bike for its very high value to performance ratio. Why is this the case? I mean, both bikes are stiff, they're fun to ride, and designed for fast riding. Now, as a no expense spared bike, you gotta go with the Scott foil, no question. You'll never look out of place at any group ride, and just the style overall is instantly recognizable. However, if crashing and replacing parts is important to you, then a Tavel Aero is going to make a lot more sense. We're basically talking about a $2,000 frame set of the Aero versus a $5,500 frame with the Scott foil RC. Now on the flats and immediate power transfer, the Scott foil wins just barely. But if you do any bit of out of the saddle climbing, whether you live somewhere with a lot of hills or just sustained climbing, then I would probably prefer the Tavel Aero. It just feels a little bit more nimble out of the saddle, and that would make sense considering that it is geared towards more being a one bike to rule them all. Now, when it comes to comfort, using the same wheels on both frame sets, I would say they are about equal in that regard. So that's basically a draw. The Tavel Aero, however, does have a wider tire clearance and a more traditional Aero looking design. The Scott foil is just such a fun bike to ride, but I would just be so nervous to fly with this bike on an airline because replacement parts are just very difficult to come by, and usually just a frame set alone option is also always out of stock. But all in all, when it comes to these two bikes or frame sets, truthfully guys, and I'm being 100% truthful with you, I could completely scale down my entire rotation of road bikes with just these two bikes. They're both that good. The Scott foil would be my everyday halo bike, and then the Tavel Aero I would use for traveling, for structured training, and then just the very small handful of crit races that I do every year, because I really would not want to crash on an $8,000 or $9,000 bike. So what's next? So my plan is to eventually get my hands on the latest QuickPro ER1 frame set for a ride and review. Reason being is just because in terms of both design and perceived riding dynamics, that frame set seems to come super close to the Scott foil RC Pro, and this is always something that I've been wanting to investigate. And the thing with that frame set is it's less than half the price of the Scott foil RC Pro. And based on some of the customer feedback I've gotten on that frame set and bike, I've heard nothing but great things about the QuickPro ER1. So that's going to wrap up today's video, guys. Once again, huge thank you to Cycle Limited for providing me this frame set for testing and review. Be sure to use my code, which should give you a little bit of a discount from the website, whether you are buying a frame set or a complete bike, or if you're just looking for components for your next build. Questions, comments, and concerns, please feel free to leave them down below, and I will check you guys on the next one. Thank you so much for watching. Peace.